Hi, friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hello APGD, a neighborhood podcast about the Audubon Park Garden District in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Michael Lothrop, and today we'll be speaking with Gabby Lothrop, director of the Audubon Park Community Market and founding member of East End Market, and also my wife. If you can't make it to Gabby's Market on Monday evenings at Stardust, you can also visit them at audubonmarket.com or on Facebook and Instagram. This episode is brought to you in part by Trevor Brown, Audubon Park resident and trusted Central Florida realtor with Fannie Hillman and Associates, proudly serving their clients for over 40 years. For listings, market trends, helpful home buyer and seller tips, email directly to trevor@fanniehillman.com or find him on Instagram at Trevor Brown Realtor. And with me today is Gabby Lothrop of the Audubon Park Community Market. Welcome, Gabby.
Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. This is a real get. And since it's my birthday, you agreed to be on the podcast. And you've been a very big influence on kind of the nature of things in Audubon Park. And just wanted to say thank you from me and from all of Audubon Park on everything that you've contributed. Let's talk about some of those things.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Don't oversell me.
I will try my best to not oversell you. So you've been doing the market. You've been the director of the market at Stardust for 14 years?
In February, it will be 14 years.
Happy almost anniversary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And when it began, it was an idea and kind of a concept and sort of originated really with our friend, Emily Rankin. And she had some other plans afterwards and kind of like left it in your hands, and you took the reins and you have grown this market into this real cultural center and phenomenon in Audubon Park.
Well, thank you. That's very nice. It's a little labor of love. Emily Rankin, lifelong Audubon Park resident, well, not currently, but she grew up here, did start the market. She had the vision, saw the need, definitely was a trailblazer on a lot of local food projects here in Orlando. And I was lucky enough to meet her because we were neighbors. And I offered to volunteer, and over time it became my market. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Similar to, we got kind of asked to be on the board of the Garden District, the Main Street organization, kind of almost at the very beginning of it. And I think just a couple years after I became board president. And so these things just kind of solidify, and then we sort of like, okay, sure, we'll take on more responsibility.
I think it's part of anchoring yourself in your community. And as somebody who didn't grow up in this country, let alone in Orlando, it was part of putting down some roots and getting to find my place here. So
tell me about that. You grew up in Panama.
I did. How did you know that?
I've done my research.
Listener, I am the wife of your host.
Oh.
In case you missed that.
I guess we have to use that as a disclaimer, right? Yes, that is true.
This is pure nepotism.
We live together. We are married. So, yeah, let's get that out of the way right from the beginning.
Yes, I grew up in Panama. My mother is American. My father was Panamanian. And I grew up there and moved here just before college because my mother moved to Central Florida. I got into UCF, and with my scholarship and my mom being here, I had somewhere to live. And that was kind of the only reason I stuck around here. And I worked in my field of international relations for about 8 years. But, I met a guy, and I moved into his neighborhood and started getting involved, and somehow became a farmer's market manager.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks. He sounds like a very lucky fella.
Oh, I'm the lucky fella.
Oh, we both are. So So when you came to Florida, you had visited some, but you were living in Oviedo at the time, which is kind of the area that UCF is technically Orlando, but the neighborhoods adjacent are Oviedo. So over there, it was kind of a different scene. It's sort of a lot of kind of box stores and strip malls and things like that.
Yeah, I don't think that I had really experienced the American suburb before. I have some family in the States, but like my grandparents lived in a super rural area, and then a lot of the family I visited would be in bigger cities. And so I hadn't really like lived that suburb life, and it kind of felt like you were nowhere and everywhere at the same time.
Yeah.
Everything looked the same to me. And it was like almost a guarantee that every strip mall would have, an anchor grocery store. And then, for some reason at the time that I moved here, there was always like a GNC in the strip mall.
People need their vitamins.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting it from food, right?
But I guess.
Yeah, it's a fact.
So, it just felt like super repetitive. And no shade to Oviedo. It's, I know that Oviedo has a lovely little historic downtown, and it has like some cool kind of new urbanist style developments going on. And it's, most importantly, close to UCF. But it just was, I grew up kind of between what was like the Panama Canal Zone, which is its own thing, and the city of Panama, which is a big, vibrant city with a lot of unique neighborhoods, and almost any kind of restaurant you can think of. So it was really weird to me that it felt like every like other stoplight was the same 6 restaurants, and they were all, another Chili's, or another. This
is in Oviedo.
Yeah, or in the Florida suburbs. So
it
was not. It's not that it isn't culture. It just wasn't a culture that I've connected with. So after college, it started to feel like more of somewhere that I could live. And then moving to Audubon Park and being able to like walk to a lot of businesses and walk around the neighborhood and say hi to your neighbors, because that's not always a thing. People just like drive into their garage and just go straight into their house. And this neighborhood has more carports. It just, it reminded me of that kind of small town with an access of a metropolis feeling. And so that stark contrast between the suburb life, and no shade to suburb life, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah. And it's a different mentality too, right? When you have these kind of chains, the people that are working in those stores don't really have the same level of ownership that they do in a neighborhood like this. So that interaction that you get is going to be very different.
Yeah, I think that is part of it, is that everyone is just a little bit more open here.
They're connected to what is here, right? It belongs here because people brought it here, and they're it's part of them. Yeah. So it feels more personal.
So that's why when I heard that this awesome woman, Emily, was running the farmers market in the neighborhood, and it had been first at the Audubon Park Covenant Church, which is such an awesome place, and it's right in the heart of the neighborhood residentially. Like, it's surrounded by houses, and I think it just was ahead of its time. So that location kind of didn't work.
And that is where Pastor Sarah Robinson,
that's right,
previous guest on the podcast.
Guest. So who knows how it would be if it was there now, but it was there, and it was on a Saturday, and it just, I guess, just wasn't getting a lot of traction. And then they moved it right out onto the main business strip at what was Colonial Bank, and then later BB&T Bank, and now BEMBOM. And it was still on Saturdays, and I think, again, ahead of its time, and also competing with, with some bigger farmers markets.
There's a lot going on Saturday morning.
So when I heard that Emily was moving the market to a weeknight market, and moving it to Stardust, which to me felt like the cultural center of the neighborhood, I was like, how can I help? So I think that it was a lot about this neighborhood and the kind of openness that people have, and the idea of embracing a farmer's market as a third place, what we don't have in Audubon Park is a lot of easily accessible parks. I mean, we have Luke Gardens. It's not the easiest to walk through. Hello, we need to fix Korean Drive. But also, we have Blue Jacket Park, which is a beautiful, expansive, amazing park, but it's also like a little bit of a chore to get to. So it was like we kind of needed to create an outdoor gathering space that was in the heart of the business district. And that was attractive to me, and that's why I got involved. Basically, a third place from my perspective and my memory is that, you have your work and you have home, and then you have the other places that you meet. And it could be church, a park where everyone gets together. It's, another way for people to intermingle and to like feel a sense of belonging and to connect with their community that's not home or school or work.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the thing that we choose because, work, obviously we choose where we work to some extent. You're in a job, you have certain hours that you have to be at the place. So a certain amount of time is kind of spoken for. And then, we have other responsibilities in life, families, things like that we choose those things to an extent, but also those things they do own our time and how we spend our free time that is kind of open for spending. That's sort of what people are seeking out more rather than going to the box stores and going to the strip malls.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for, spontaneous discourse. It's, an opportunity to interact with people that aren't part of your work or home life. It's just something different, And so obviously going to a restaurant or bar is kind of that too, but creating this like kind of outdoor thing and bringing some things to the neighborhood that weren't here were, kind of all part of it. And for me anyway, we have this awesome neighborhood and you can walk or bike to a lot of stuff safely. And that's very attractive to me and to a lot of people. But before East End, especially, you couldn't pick up like provisions. I still go to the grocery store, but we kind of tried to make more of those things, bringing them at least one night a week.
Right.
And that's what we try to do now.
And the idea of a farmer's market is really to take away some of those barriers to entry that entrepreneurs face in going with a brick and mortar to start. So they have the opportunity to kind of try out their idea, their product, see how it sells without investing too much and then kind of growing it from there.
Yeah, I think farmers markets lower barriers of entry on a lot of different levels. From the consumer side, there's a generally well-oiled machine of food distribution in this country. And you can go into a grocery store and find a lot of things, no matter what the season, whatever your whim is. And, you can go to a lot of restaurants and there's certain foods that are available all the time, no matter what.
Because of shipping and
it's like
when they pick things.
Yeah, it's like if apples aren't, in season in Michigan, maybe they're going to be in season in Chile, which is fine. But for people who want a more local selection of food for different reasons, this is a way of creating that access rather than having to, get in your car and go visit every farm, and not every farm is open to the public.
Right.
This is just a small opportunity to bring those things to us. And, people might want it because some things that are traveling a lot of miles are picked not at their peak. And so you're just never going to get that like perfect level of freshness that you would get from something that was picked locally and didn't have to travel as far. Or maybe it's because you care about the inputs in the farming. You want something that was grown using, regenerative or organic practices. And the best way to verify that and to know that it's effective is, on a small scale farm, to actually interact with the grower. And so that's a big part of the attraction. Some people, it's as simple as wanting to lower their carbon footprint. I think a lot of it is about transparency, and we lower the barrier of entry in terms of getting to that transparency and connecting with the people who are making or growing your food by bringing it to you once a week. For the grower or for the food entrepreneur, there are a lot more variety of models now. I mean, like East End and other food halls have kind of created a way for food entrepreneurs to take a baby step. If all you have to do is buy an annual license and a tent and some tables, and it's not free, but it's a lot less expensive than renting a standard 1,000 square foot space in a strip mall, and having to build it out and take on a fair amount of financial risk. This is a good way to kind of go, yeah, like you said, is this worth doing? I love my recipe for sourdough bread, and I know I make great sourdough bread, but I don't know if that means I can make money off of it.
Right.
So it's a lot easier to set up a booth at a few farmers markets. Not easy in the physical and necessarily spiritual sense, but it's easier than committing to, a long-term lease or even a 3 to 5 year lease to open a store until this is an opportunity to really directly interact with your customers and calibrate your product and really find out what sells and what doesn't, and why people like what they do and why they don't. The same thing goes for growers. There's a lot of things that you can grow in Florida year round, technically, but different seasons produce different crops. And so being at the market as a smaller farmer, you get to really actually get that direct feedback of what are people looking for. I mean, if they're looking for apples, that's not something that grows commercially in Florida.
Right.
It's you can hear it directly from the farmer. They can explain to you why you can or can't get it. It's like, I don't think anyone's ever brought rhubarb to market because it's extraordinarily hard to grow in Florida. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but it's not grown for market. So again, farmers are able to, fine tune what they're growing and when, get that feedback from the consumers. And then consumers also are learning how to.
They really are.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I remember back around when the market started at Stardust, and some of our friends who hadn't really previously been interested in where their food comes from saw the documentary Food Inc.
Yeah, that was very good timing.
Yeah, and I think more programming has come out like that to kind of educate people on what they're putting in their bodies and what effect it has. And you definitely see it at the market. The customers are they're very educated on what they're buying. They know why it may cost a little bit more than if they went to the store, economies of scale, the way that it's raised. And they're willing to seek that out, and they're willing to, buy things only when they're in season, because everything at your market is grown locally in Central Florida and produced in Central Florida. And you've been to the farms, you know exactly where these things come from. So there's that traceability. There's an understanding of what practices, basically grown to organic standards without having to get the certifications.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes back to the ability to have those direct conversations with the vendors, with the farmers and the makers, is that some of these farms are so small that organic certification doesn't make financial sense, but they're willing to basically put everything on display for you,
right?
And tell you what inputs they're using,
because that's what really counts,
right?
Yeah. Ultimately, you don't want to put pesticides or anything that was artificially added to grow these plants, right? That fertilization.
Yeah, as a general rule, our preference is to favor the production of food that is as sustainably produced and as minimally altered.
Sure.
And that has some sense of preserving the future ability to continue creating food. So it's intended to be more of a long-term investment. It's definitely part of a series of tactics for repairing the food system and providing some alternative ways to engage with the food system.
People do care more about sustainability, about what's going on with the environment and climate change and these things that, we realize that certain types of agriculture do contribute to those problems that we're experiencing with these natural disasters.
Yeah, that's
so
definitely part of it. And the pandemic and then some of the supply chain issues is that it did lead to a little bit of a resurgence in interest in shopping at the farmers market. First, I remember March 2020 when everything was shutting down for the pandemic and people were people were panic buying because they didn't know when they were going to get to go back to the store.
Sure.
We didn't really know what was going to happen. And I remember all over social media, people saying, well, Publix is out of chicken. And our chicken farmer was like, I have chicken right here.
Yeah.
So he came to the market and sold quite a few chickens right before lockdown. And then when we reopened a couple months later, people were like, oh, this chicken's better.
It's so much better, right?
And
because of the way it was raised.
Yeah, and they were buying it. And I think they got a glimpse of what was going on with the supply chain in terms of like as amazingly well as it seems to work in the background and we don't have to think about it and the food just shows up.
Yeah.
People were seeing images of crops just like getting tilled under because they didn't have a way to sell them. And it was the beginning of what would become, something we're still dealing with today. Just some of the things weren't making it onto the great conveyor belt of the food system.
Plus labor shortages,
yeah.
the difficulty of getting workers out harvesting crops and things like that.
So there was a lot of different, reasons why, but it was an opportunity for like the general public to kind of get a glimpse at that and go, well, the farmers market don't have to deal with that as much. That doesn't mean it didn't affect our smaller farmers and producers. There are still supply chain issues. There was difficulty getting seeds. There's been some difficulty getting some of the ingredients people work with, but they're not ordering on the scale that some of these bigger producers are. So a lot of them have been able to make it work. So we haven't had to deal with as stark a change in what's available.
Right.
And one of the other things that we've seen and we're still seeing is that a lot of the grocery stores, because of inflation, because of supply chain issues, the prices have gone up. And in some cases, not all, but in some cases, you're hearing a lot about the quality not being there, especially for the fresh produce. And so at the farmers market, we're now seeing a lot more price parity. Because it does tend to be a little more expensive to buy from a small sustainable farm, but the quality of the product you're getting is often miles above anything you're going to get at the grocery store. And it's going to last longer because it was picked the day of the market or the day before. It didn't spend a whole bunch of time in a warehouse or in a truck or in,
it traveled literally from down the street.
Yeah. So sometimes what is, seen as a barrier of entry to shopping at a farmer's market is that, these things are going to be more expensive. Well, honestly, we're not seeing a lot of difference in price between a lot of the things in the grocery stores and you're seeing at the market. Differences at the market, it might actually make it to the end of the week in your fridge. And
as you said, people taste the difference and that sells itself. When you realize like what a chicken is supposed to taste like, when it's not raised in, pretty horrible conditions. It has been given a chance to live its life and not pumped with things to kind of make it grow quicker. It's a whole different process. It's much more, it's literally much more natural and you can taste what those things are, those flavors are supposed to be.
And from like a, sustainability perspective, there's a lot of different reasons why some people do or don't eat meat. We try to be a market for everybody.
Right.
But, if the chicken is more expensive, but you still want to eat it, maybe just don't eat it as often, but make sure that when you're eating is produced responsibly. And the trade-off is it's going to taste so much better.
Yeah.
So,
and we should all be eating a little bit less meat.
Yes, I'm going to say it.
Yes, we should vary our, I think balance is healthy either way, but
I think a diverse diet is good. And, we all get stuck in mono diet issues sometimes. And the farmer's market is a good way to get out of that rut. I kind of decide what I'm cooking for the week based on what I buy on Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
And then if there's something I wasn't able to get there that I need for menu planning, that's when I go to the grocery store. But I love it, especially now that we're getting into fall, when we start getting really beautiful local crops, because that 100% dictates what I'm going to make for the week.
Absolutely. And the farmers that are at your market, they can tell you sort of how best to use these vegetables too, because they're eating them as well, and they'll tell you kind of if you're cooking with certain things, like what works, like they're able to kind of fill you in on what it's used for, right?
Yeah, and I would say also you can always pop by market headquarters, because Isabel, my teammate, and I, we eat a lot from the market.
Yes. And you're very great in the kitchen.
Oh, thank you.
So, yes.
Thank you. I'm so domestic.
Speak from experience. Mm-hmm.
But it is, we're always happy to share what we make from the ingredients we buy at the market. And the other thing that's great is that we have food vendors, or, who you can buy dinner from, and quite a few of them pick up their ingredients from the vendors. So you can always see what they're doing with the ingredients too.
So this is chefs from restaurants that
well, but also
are
at the
shopping
market. Like, for instance, last night, Cocina Tume was making this really beautiful arroz sin pollo. So it's a plant-based version of arroz con pollo, rice with chicken.
Mm-hmm.
And they used a lot of like veggies that they picked up at the farmers markets. And then they, instead of chicken, used mushrooms from Florida Stream King. And so, Florida Stream King will do a demo sometimes on how to just really quickly and easily saute those mushrooms in a cast iron with a little bit of salt, pepper, olive oil, and they're amazing.
Yeah.
And there's like some fairly easy ways to cook mushrooms, but it's really awesome when you get to see a vendor who's like a really experienced chef turning something out using the ingredient in a way that maybe you haven't yet.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that will encourage you to continue shopping from them,
right,
and also to experiment at home with the ingredients. So
it gets you more excited about the product, because, it's one thing to see it on a table and, yeah, those mushrooms are beautiful. And
yeah.
Just the variety, his knowledge, his passion about it. Mm-hmm. There's really nobody in the area that's doing it at that level. And then when you try his product, in kind of a finished form, mm-hmm, when it's cooked, and it is so good, and it can replace meat on certain dishes,
Yeah.
and like, that's just such a powerful thing. I think that when we're feeding ourselves better and it tastes better, and the people that are actually behind the process, and that they're not cutting any corners, that they're not doing anything terrible to the food, and I think that you can't really put a price tag on it. And it's, as you said, some of the costs of just conventional farming that you get at the grocery store, some of those products basically have caught up with what you're finding at the market, but they're still the market is really the place to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think so too.
And it really is. It's a party in the parking lot. There's usually live music. It is that destination hub. And I feel like the community around the market has developed as such. East End is a direct product of the market. There were a lot of vendors that were there. Lineage started at your market.
Yeah.
And just watching them kind of fine-tune their product and getting these coffee beans
mm-hmm,
just so perfect. And literally, it's some of the best coffee I've ever had. That came from that experience of just really working it out, making the product the best they could, and building their customer base. And at Stardust, it's a coffee shop as well, but people were kind of excited about this different thing and roasted locally.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that this neighborhood has proven is that we love coffee.
We certainly do.
There's so many coffee shops here.
We do.
They all are great in their own ways, which is really cool.
Yeah. They're all thriving.
Yeah. People love coffee.
I love coffee.
I'm Panamanian and I love coffee.
Relatable. Yeah.
I think that the cool thing about being around almost 14 years now has been seeing some of these really awesome businesses keep going,
mm-hmm,
like come out to the market and do their thing. And by no means were we the only outlet that they were working with, but we were proud to be part of it.
Yeah.
Part of their early days where they were out, every week selling what they made or what they grew. And then they just kept going and reached a point where they were, only doing bigger farmers markets or festivals, or, even better, opening brick and mortars.
And multiple even.
Yeah. And that's really exciting. It's cool to play a part in that and to feel that connection. It further roots you in the community, and it keeps you cheering everyone on.
Yeah.
To have developed relationships with them in the early years. And it's a good reminder when, you look back and sometimes it's really hard.
It's hard work running a market.
And it's exhausting.
I'm amazed by what you do.
And sometimes, we've been around long enough that we have grown and shrunk and grown and shrunk. And I feel like right now we're in an upswing, and trends change, and what people are like really feverishly interested in changes. So, we always have the diehard customers. And I think a lot of people, once they become regulars at the market, they continue to be regulars. But as the kind of food community in Orlando kept getting better and better, there were some moments where I was like, I don't know if we need to do this anymore. This, it's getting harder. I'm tired. We're cycling through vendors, and then you kind of remember, like, this business was a startup once, and now they have 3 brick and mortars, and this was part of them starting up. So one of the things that like kind of keeps you going in this is that you think you're starting to kind of slow down and lose your steam, and then you meet a business or a handful of business owners or farmers that are just getting started, and you're like, that's so exciting, and it revs you up again. And so I feel like we're in a season of a lot of that excitement happening again, where we're seeing some really cool businesses come through, some awesome, mostly young farmers getting out there. And so even though we've had seasons where the market was bigger and flashier, it's always maintained that consistency of being a place where the food is 100% locally grown. Everything is made here. And it is an amazing community of people who are trying something hard and sharing it. And it's always inspiring enough to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so who are some of the vendors that you're very excited about that have come your way recently?
I mean, I don't want to show favorites.
No, it's okay. But there's a lot of new ones to showcase.
Yeah,
right?
we have a lot of new vendors. So we have some vendors who have been with us forever. Almost.
Wild Ocean being one of them.
Wild Ocean Seafood is still with us and has been with us since the first year. Heart of Christmas Farms has been a vendor since the second year. Second Breakfast, Audrey, who specializes in Florida-grown fruit and edible plants, and she also makes amazing jams from the fruit. She's been a vendor with us on and off since almost the beginning as well. So we have some kind of cornerstone vendors, but...
and you always see them with customers, too.
Yeah, a lot of them have had the same customers for years. And we, they're not the only ones who've been with us for multiple years, but they've been with us the most years. And I mean, I'm always really excited that Slow Turtle Farm is a vendor at the market. I remember...
And their goat milk
or
goat cheese.
Slow Turtle Farm produces goat cheese, artisan goat cheeses. It's a farmstead cheese, meaning that it's produced on the same farm where the milk is produced. And it's Carol and her husband, John. And I mean, we've known Carol for years now, and we have watched her fight to become a USDA grade A dairy.
Gone through all of the processing, like all of the...
really hard, especially for a small farm. And the definition of a small farm, surprisingly, compared to a lot of these farms, could encompass a much bigger farm.
Mm-hmm.
But these farms are on the small end of small farms.
Yeah.
And
they're like almost micro farms, but that's not really a thing, is it?
Yeah. And so, watching her go through all of these hoops to fight for her farm, and it never stops being a fight, but finally getting certified and seeing her product in restaurants, but also seeing her product every Monday at the market is, it's her triumph, but we are excited to have, been a part of it and been there with her for a lot of that, that journey. And she's still on it. I mean, it doesn't suddenly get easy to farm just because you've got your certifications. She has to now maintain those certifications, and farming is just hard anyway.
Yeah.
I mentioned Florida Shroom King. I think one of the exciting things about cultivating mushrooms is that they are extremely healthy and they're useful in a lot of different ways. And here in Florida, we have our growing seasons are kind of, but not completely backwards from like the rest of the continental U.S. We have like 2 kind of warm seasons. We have 2 tomato seasons, and in those 2 seasons are also producing like eggplant and peppers and like zucchini and stuff. And then we have like winter seasons, but at the same time in Florida that you're pulling cauliflower, you can be getting avocado from South Florida. So it's like we have like it's a different schedule that you have to acclimate yourself to if you are used to when things are growing up north. Our kind of slow season for a lot of crops is the summer. And it's not that we can't grow more tropical things. We're still not there on the demand and the knowledge, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
And so in the summer, you're not going to find a lot of the, what I would call like grocery store vegetables, because it's the hardest time to grow food. It's hot. It rains a lot. There are so many bugs. It is a struggle. And I know that up north, summer is associated with kind of abundance. So
we've traveled to Maine in the summer and gone to their farmers markets.
Right?
And
been very jealous of what they have at that time of year.
Yeah.
But what we do have is that our growing season, is of those traditional quote unquote crops are, it's a longer season, right? And we have awesome variety, at a time of year that sometimes people have nothing. And so I'm not, I love it.
And we have all of the snowbirds that travel from up north. I mean,
they got to eat too.
They do.
Yeah.
There's a lot more demand, and we see a lot more traffic.
Yeah.
And I think it's both of those things, isn't it?
Yeah. But going back to the mushrooms, here's something that is an agricultural product that can be grown year round. And so, in the summer, as you know, I try to incorporate as much fresh and local as I can into our diet. One, to support, but also because that's how we eat.
Right.
And so, you're going to see a lot more like mushrooms and microgreens and stuff going into our meals in the summer, and, tropical things like mangoes and avocados and more herbs and that sort of thing. So we're still eating super fresh, but we're getting to, we have to change what it is that we're eating. And so having
our expectation, right? When we understand why it is the way that it is.
And it's not making sacrifices.
No.
We're eating super well. But so, it's really great having Florida Shroom King providing that fresh product year round. It's really great having microorganics providing microgreens year round, because that's something you can, get a lot of that nutritional benefit from freshly grown product all the time. And so those are some great anchors. I mean, we have fleet farming at the market, and they stuck it out with us this summer. They, just figured out what things they could continue to grow and cultivate and harvest. Everything they grow is from very small farmlets around the community. Winter Park Urban Farm is back with us for the season. Mason was kind of a graduate of the School of Fleet Farming, but he's since kind of just rushed on his own, and he's also farming urban plots, mostly in Winter Park. And I mean, beautiful, beautiful produce.
The stuff that comes out of those yards.
Yeah.
And the fact that land could, people previously were just growing grass there.
Yeah. So that's the same with Fleet and with Winter Park Urban Farm. So I like this idea that you don't need to have a lawn. You can have a really beautiful and vibrant garden. We just added Secret Garden Guru, and she's a flower farmer. Her name is Lindsay, and she lives in College Park, and she grows beautiful flowers in her yard. And I mean, she was at the market last night and sold out of her bouquets because they are gorgeous. So I guess I'm kind of just telling you about the growers.
I mean, that's where it starts, right? It's like all food has to be grown. So
or raised, so
or raised.
We do have we have tribal acres, and they're in the relative sense fairly new to scene. I think they've been with us maybe about a year. And they have a farm in Lake County, and it's a family-run business. They are really committed to regenerative practices, and they do raise animals. They raise livestock. They use pasture rotation. They're very open and transparent about what they're raising, how they're raising. They also take in like rescue farm animals that they just let be animals. And so that's been a really great addition. They also, on top of, selling eggs and cuts of meat, that sort of thing, they do a lot of on-farm, like pickling and preserving. So you'll find a little mix of all things farm at their booth. And they've been a really exciting addition.
Great branding, too.
Yeah.
Just,
I know.
They really have their act together.
How are these guys so new? They seem like they've been around forever, but it was,
wild.
In the grand scheme of things, in our timeline, they're very new.
Yeah.
But they're doing well, and it's really great. And so we have all these great kind of farmer, grower anchors, and we have Zen Farms that is with us right now every other week. They raise goats and hogs, and they also grow microgreens and vegetables, and they sell their eggs. So they've got a little bit of that kind of same whole farm vending approach. They'll have pickles that come from their farm, and they'll have raw goat's milk cheese and that sort of thing. So
these are the things that the idea of a farmer's market, it really does conjure up these products, right?
Yeah.
Like this is what it should be. And, when we have traveled to Maine, that's exactly what their market looks like, right? This is just a smaller version of that.
Yeah, this is just neighborhood scale. We max out at like 30-something vendors because of the size of the parking lot where we operate. And we're fine with that as long as we feel like the quality is there. So, we have these growers/farmers as our anchors, and then we have all these amazing food artisans who are making sourdough bread and making beautiful, beautiful pastries and baked goods.
I mean, some of the best stuff that you've ever had, right? I mean, it really it's amazing how much this market has changed our lives.
It has. Yeah.
I mean, we've just connected with amazing people, lifelong friends, and it is like that quality of life thing that, as I talk to people in the Audubon Park Garden District, it's just more and more like it really is about that. It's like that's what makes this place so genuinely awesome and desirable.
Yeah.
Is that this is something that improves your life, and it improves the lives of the people that are making it and bringing it to the market, right?
Yeah, and I think, something that I'm proud of is that when we have new vendors on board and participate, no one's ever been like, this is the most packed market I've ever sold at, or, it definitely is the kind of market where vendors build that customer base.
Right.
But they're always so complimentary about the community, about the customers, and about their fellow vendors. I mean, we really are our own little community within the community, and people from different walks of life and different political opinions and different
it's everybody
problems.
That's the idea of community, right?
Yeah, and so it's a place where we kind of all get to not just coexist but find ways to connect.
Yeah, it's so important.
Which is and then all while we're putting better food into our bodies.
Yeah, and celebrating something that's truly awesome. And one of the really incredible things that you have helped bring to reality is having the SNAP program at your market and at Winter Park Farmers Market, which really kind of improved the standards of Winter Park Farmers Market, which is, they're kind of a competitor, but kind of also not, because it's a different client base. It's on a different day.
Yeah, we have a little bit of overlap in vendors, and
Sure.
I think that's a good thing. I mean, anywhere that our vendors are able to, bring in revenue and keep their businesses growing, it's a good thing.
Yeah. And then if they can't make it to the Saturday market in Winter Park, they'll come Monday.
Yeah.
To
So
Audubon Park.
we started the SNAP program in 2016 at Audubon, and then 2017 at Winter Park Farmers Market. And basically, for any listener who doesn't know what SNAP is, it's the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and it's what was formerly called food stamps. And so having SNAP at farmers markets is not a new concept, and it's there's a lot of great organizations and people who have been putting a lot of energy into this for a long time. But it just so happened that in the greater Orlando area, no farmers market was accepting SNAP. And there are some barriers of entry, and somebody has to basically take on responsibility for it. And so at the time, I finally got my act together and applied to participate in the program and become an EBT processor at Audubon. And in the meantime, the city of Winter Park had been trying to figure out a way to bring SNAP to their market. And, I came on first just, kind of as a consultant to help them get their program started. And then what ended up happening was the best way for the city to get the program in place was to just hire a third party, which became my company, to run the program for them. So at both farmers markets, when a customer wants to use their SNAP benefits to shop, they would come to the headquarters booth and swipe their EBT card, their electronic benefits transfer card. And basically, it's like hitting up a SNAP ATM. We give them shopping tokens instead of cash. And so you would get, say you want to spend $40 on groceries. We would give you $40 in SNAP tokens to take around and shop from all of the eligible vendors. And SNAP covers all your groceries, basically. So fruits, vegetables, edible plants and seeds, baked goods, eggs, meat, USDA licensed dairy, pastries, juice, things that you're going to take home and cook with.
Right.
And we, at the same time that we started here, we signed on to a statewide program called Fresh Access Bucks that at the time was with Florida Organic Growers and now is overseen by Feeding Florida. And they provide matching dollars from USDA grant money to, again, lower some of those barriers of entry and access to SNAP shoppers. So we match whatever amount of money they take out up to $40. So if you take out $40 in SNAP, you can use that $40 on any of those SNAP eligible items. We're also going to give you $40 to spend on Florida-grown fruits, vegetables, and edible plants. And so at Audubon, that's pretty straightforward. All the fruits, vegetables, and edible plants at the market are Florida-grown.
Right.
And so it's very easy to come and shop and take, your tokens. And what we tell customers to do is, hey, you might want to prioritize using your green tokens on your fruits and veggies first so that you have your SNAP tokens to use on, everything else. So it doubles that buying power. It incentivizes buying fresh ingredients, which sometimes people don't do because it's more expensive.
Right.
And so it gives a way to incentivize, buying those fresh ingredients. It's funded through Farm Bill money. And so that's Farm Bill money that's going back to actual small farmers, which is really exciting for us. And then, at Winter Park, they're a bigger market. And they have local food, but they also have some produce resale. And so it incentivized the market to add more local vendors and to label what was grown in Florida and what wasn't. So it just added a little bit of transparency, which was, it's good in general, but it also was part of being able to receive that grant money.
Yeah.
Because it can't be used on produce that isn't grown in the state of Florida. So it's another way that farmers markets have an opportunity to lower the barriers of access and entry. And during the pandemic, when a lot of people were on SNAP, it was one of the first kind of fail safes that people were able to get in the very beginning of the pandemic, when people were just getting furloughed and there was a lot of confusion and it was very difficult to get unemployment. It's not easy to get SNAP, but it was easier to get SNAP than unemployment. And so for some people, it was a really big deal to be able to double those dollars and stretch those dollars shopping at the market.
Right?
And then, yes,
I mean,
and
everybody
continue to eat well.
Yeah, everybody deserves to eat well, and this really brings that to more people's kitchens. Right?
Absolutely. I think we all deserve to start with the same ingredients. And, there's a lot of different reasons why some things, are more expensive than others. And it's in some cases complicated, in others it's not. But it doesn't have to be that way. Yeah. And so
it shouldn't be like elitist or anything like that.
Yeah, this is a way
everyone.
to bring some equity into it, because there's a lot of reasons that things cost more or less. So we just, level the playing field, love putting some USDA money back into farmers' hands. It's a win-win situation in our opinion.
And one of the things that happened previous to this at Winter Park Farmers Markets was you would not see a lot of local growers going to that market, vending at that market, because they were competing with resellers, and the customers didn't necessarily understand the difference. So they would have a table with what was in season, which wasn't a lot, and then you would go, just a couple vendors down, and their table was filled with stuff from all over,
which is fine. There's a lot of different types of markets out there, but I think again that for us at Audubon, it's important that our customers learn with us and, become acquainted with what is seasonally available. But there's less of an opportunity to learn that when you don't know what grows here and when, and, there's some contradicting information out there.
Some of the farmers wouldn't want to be at Winter Park Farmers Market because that transparency was not there.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't really do as well because people didn't even really walk up to their booth, or, it was harder to get into that market, those kind of things.
There's a lot of different reasons. And I think that part of it is just that the environment has changed a lot. I think there's a lot more interest and openness in supporting local farms, and a lot more knowledge out there than there was, back in 2009 when I got started on this, 2008, 2009. So there's a lot of reasons for it, but definitely, for us as the grant holder for that, it's really important to us that information is clear.
Yeah.
And
by law, it's required. So it's very important.
So that's been very good, and it's really important to us in terms of our ability to serve the SNAP shopper, that we have that variety. That we have SNAP shoppers that come to both markets because they can use the benefit twice in a week if it's at two different markets. Yeah. And so there are things that they can get at Winter Park that they will never be able to get at Audubon, and there are things at Audubon that they may never get at Winter Park. And so they now know, they can use their fresh access bucks, their matching benefits at either market, and then the SNAP stays within those markets. So it spreads out some of that money, and it also increases the buying power of the SNAP customers. So, for us, it's really, it's been an important addition to what we do at the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stardust it's such a cool place that is very organic in its kind of operation. It's like, there's no really other place like it that I can think of.
No, I think, I think back to those early days and just being so excited when I heard Emily was going to move the market there, because it's a perfect made fit. Sense to me. One of the nice things is that you can grab, on a cold night, you can grab a coffee or tea or a hot toddy and take it around the market. And on a warm night, you can grab a delicious margarita or some fancy cocktail that Jenna has put together. And if you're not feeling the food vendors at the market, which I hope that's not the case, but everyone has different tastes and you have different moods. You can always get the full menu at Stardust during the market. So there's something for everyone. You really can have dinner, visit with your friends, get a little cocktail, get a little coffee, pick up your groceries, and having it at Stardust enables that. It facilitates that for us.
It's such a great Monday evening tradition too. Mondays are hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, some schedule-wise, it doesn't always work for some people, but it used to be on a Wednesday, but I kind of love that it starts out the week, because people do their meal prep and planning and, pick up their groceries at the market. And I really love what you do. I'm just so grateful to be married to you. But
Thank you.
even if I were not, I would be in awe of you, and I know so many people are.
That's
and
very kind.
I hear it all the time, and I realize how lucky we are to have you here, and you do amazing things. So
thank you.
I hope you continue to do that. And the website that people go to visit the market?
It's audubonmarket.com.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on Instagram and Facebook, both as at Audubon Market.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Before we wrap it up, some of the meal options that are at the market now, I'm crazy about the pizza. It's a sourdough crust.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have some regular food vendors that are there with dinner options all the time. We have Siam Bakari, who Cesar makes beautiful sourdough breads, but he also makes sourdough pizzas right there on the spot in this very cool little pizza oven. And we have Ceylon Hut, which is Sri Lankan food. Delicious.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's really fun because there's always some kind of curry on the menu, but it's like last night it was a green apple curry.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a mango curry. There's a lot of really fun options coming off of that truck. There's always Stardust. And then we have Cycle, who they do a lot of pastries and baking, but they also sometimes will have Chilean empanadas, and they'll also do tamales, which are delicious. So there's always something you can pick up for dinner from the vendors. You can also just I'm not going to judge you if you just want to have like a box of cookies or like, a cupcake for dinner.
Sure.
You got to treat yourself. But then, we also do pop-ups. So we try to rotate different awesome food vendors. Because we're so small, we just don't have a lot of room to bring on so many more vendors. And so this is our way to kind of bring things through. So, last night we had the Bearded Vegan. Last week we had Carolyn's Vegan. It's a lot of vegan ones, but not exclusively. One of the vendors that was a pop-up vendor, Cocina Tume, has joined us as a weekly vendor. So you can always get dinner from them too. And it's always plant-based, gluten-free, soy-free, dairy-free, refined sugar-free. And their stuff is delicious. It's Peruvian food mostly. And it's so good. I know I've already mentioned them on here, so.
It's important that people know, right?
Yeah, and so we try to have something for every diet, hopefully. And then with the pop-ups, we've had Red Panda Noodle, as they're waiting to move into their brick and mortar, they're doing pop-ups all over town, and so we've been lucky enough to have them come through. And we have Gaucha Empanadas come through with their trailer sometimes. So we're hoping to kind of keep some new variety coming through that space every week. Either somebody you've seen before but aren't seeing a lot, or somebody that you've never seen and never tried their food, so that you can see what they're about too.
Yeah, it gets that exposure and it keeps it fresh. And I mean, there's just so much going on at the market, and the spirit, as you said, it kind of ebbs and flows sometimes, but this is like a really exciting time for the market. We see a lot of, as you said, like kind of younger entrepreneurs that are doing this and really making a life of it. And to see some of those vendors that had graduated and are at East End and things like that, and just your involvement with East End as a concept and sort of bringing that idea here. I know I had mentioned it on the podcast a little bit. What do you want to tell us about that?
I was involved in the kind of startup and opening of the East End, and it was a great next step in a lot of what was going on here in the local food scene. And so I'm really proud to have been there in the early years and helping get it built and helping the first round of businesses get settled in there. I did serve as the basically GM for the first year, and I think it was something that this community needed as like a way of further investing in small businesses and small food businesses and raising the profile of the food scene here. So, I'm proud to have been part of it. And I think, at the time I wasn't sure. I was like, maybe we don't need the Monday Night Market anymore. But again, it keeps coming back to, the story isn't over. There's always something new.
Yeah.
And so, I'm glad I didn't stop doing the market just because of that project. And I think, it's really cool that it's kind of like we have so much coffee in this neighborhood. We have so much local food entrepreneurism in this neighborhood.
We do.
And so far, there hasn't been too much of it. Like, no one's hurting each other by being here.
Yeah. Everybody kind of works together and tries not to have too much of, except for coffee and baked goods and sweets.
There's lots of coffee and lots of sweets.
There's lots of demand.
I don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other big kind of evolution when you started as director of the market was getting involved with slow food.
Yeah, so I mean, those early years of the market, we were small. I wasn't super tapped into the local food scene. I just knew that I wanted to be involved and that I wanted to help. And Emily was striving to keep the market 100% local, and it was hard back then. It was hard to identify farms and connect with them. And so I did connect with the local Slow Food chapter, Slow Food Orlando. And Slow Food is an international organization that basically is everything fast food is not. So advocates for sustainable farming, for quality of food, for, preserving food ways and food culture. Just slowing everything down and actually enjoying it and seeing it for what it is and what it can be. And it was the perfect way to kind of connect with a lot of the local food community, because I connected with the chapter leader at the time, and she was a farmer herself, and she was just like, oh, you need to meet this farmer, and you need to meet that farmer, and this person's on the board. And so it was this really great way to just instantly get a lay of the land and start making those relationships and start making those connections. And I think, that's what got us through the first couple of years, because I didn't really know what I was doing. And I had a full-time job, and I would, come out to the market and kind of ask myself what the heck I was doing out here in this parking lot trying to run a farmer's market.
Yeah.
But, it was grounded in this sense of community, and that's kept us going long enough. And I think that was the thing to kind of remember, is if this is something that's grounded in the sense of the community, then build your community, connect with the community that's already there, and figure out a way to grow with them. And so that, Slow Food, the other organizations dealing with food, just some of the other small businesses that were making things happen here, all, played a part in helping get the market to start to look and feel like a farmer's market.
Yeah. And it's amazing how critical that was, just getting connected, because, running a farmer's market is one thing, but it's like you don't want to make any sacrifices. You want all of the quality to be there. In order to do that, you need the farmers to take the time to be there and to believe in you, and to have the amount of customers to be repeat vendor. And you do get so much of that. Like, so many of the vendors that start at the market, you'll see them for years at a time, because they're like, this is great, and this is really helping my business. And that's what it's about, right? And
it's gotten a lot. I mean, it's still a fair amount of work keeping the vendor mix where we want it. And, there's a lot of different reasons why people will leave the market or take a break or come back. But it's definitely a lot easier now than it was back then. I mean, we had to really put a lot of effort into finding vendors that kind of fit the ethos that we were going for.
Definitely. And just building that customer base too, right? It's like, now you're such a known thing, and you're such a connector. And, we were just at East End, and we were talking to Matt Hinckley of Hinckley's Fancy Meats, and he was asking about turkeys, and
he did not ask me for my help. I just stuck my nose in it.
Well, he was in the midst of solving a problem, and we happened to be there. And because of your connection with all of these farmers and all of these products, like, you kind of knew which direction to point him in to maybe solve that problem.
Yeah, I hope it helps.
Absolutely. Yeah. But you have this knowledge, and people know that they can come to the market, and they can talk to you, they can talk to the vendors there, and they get what they're seeking out. And this is one of the only places in town that really you can do that, and it's amazing.
I just hope that, I think a lot of us come to the market for different reasons, but they're generally because we care about something. Yeah. And I hope it helps us continue to care about each other.
That's beautiful. It's so important, right? I mean, if we depend on each other for so many things, and I think that I love that in the name it's not even called a farmer's market by name, but it definitely is a farmer's market, but it's a community market.
It is.
And there's a reason for that, and you do foster that environment, and it's for everybody, and you see a very diverse mix of customers and vendors, and it's like it's not just one thing, and that's how a community is. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
And everybody looks out for one another. So, Gabby,
Michael,
thank you.
thanks for having me.
It was a real pleasure talking to you.
You too.
And we'll see you around.
Yeah, somewhere.
I don't know. We'll see. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Hello, APGD. A neighborhood podcast is brought to you in part by Stardust Video and Coffee, Audubon Park's beloved neighborhood cafe, bakery, bar, and meeting place, located at 1842 East Winter Park Road. We're also sponsored by Red Light Brew Pub. Founded in 2005, Red Light is widely known as the source for world-class imports and microbrews, a wide selection of natural wines, plus award-winning beers brewed in-house. A full kitchen is in the works with an amazing menu by Chef Jess Tantalo. Located at 2810 Corinne Drive, please check out Red Light for all things beer and wine and soon food. Our theme song is by Christopher Pierce, and special thanks to Trey Hester for all of his help in making this podcast a reality. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please click subscribe and leave a review if you'd like. We'll see you next time.